I've wanted to build myself a thin rip jig for some time now. Up until this point, whenever I've needed to cut thin strips of wood, I've always done it by eye, which isn't very repeatable and quite often gives varying results in thickness. I've had a look on YouTube and there are a number of videos out there already that cover building a thin rip jig. The popular ones seem to involve either using magnets for a cast iron top or some form of removable stop block for a non-magnetic top, such as a sight saw. I didn't have any magnets, so that initially ruled the first option out, and I wanted to build a jig which you could use on any table saw. So as long as your table saw has a mitre slot, this jig will work for you. Let's get on with the build. I'm using an offcut of Jatoba for this project. I wanted to use hardwood to try and reduce the potential for expansion and contraction over time, which would potentially make the runner stick in the slot. I made a rough measurement of how wide the main body of the jig needed to be, and once I had this measurement I cut the piece down to size. I then measured out the mitre slot on my table saw. The slot was 19mm wide at the top and 25mm wide at the T-slot. I marked out a 25mm section from the piece, which I could then trim off and use for the mitre slot runner. Initially I was going to cut the shoulders of the mitre slot runner on the table saw, but seeing as I have a negative rake saw blade, it would leave small V shapes on the top of the shoulders, so instead I decided to use the router table. I set the fence and the height of the router bit and made multiple passes on each shoulder. Each time I made a cut, I checked the fit in the mitre slot and then made small adjustments until I got a really good fit. Now that the runner was cut to the correct size, I attached it temporarily to the main jig body using hot glue. I used a combination square to make sure that the runner was parallel to the jig. I could then drill out the holes for the bolts through both the runner and the main body of the jig in one go. I'm using M6 bolts for this jig, so I drilled out 6mm holes for the bolts and then countersunk the bottom side of the runner with a 15mm Forstner bit for the head of the bolt to sit in. I separated the runner from the main body of the jig with a scrap chisel. I could then clean off all the excess hot glue. I then added the bolts and secured them in place with M6 star knobs, which will allow me to easily clamp and unclamp the jig from the table. I then marked the centre of the side of the jig and drilled a 10mm hole out for the threaded insert to screw into. I then drilled the hole out further with a 6mm drill bit. The adjustment bolt was then added to the jig, with a wing nut to act as a clamp for the bolt. The jig then got its first test. After I had adjusted the bolt to about 1mm away from the blade, I could slide the jig back away from the blade and clamp it down. Material can then be referenced against the fence. The fence is then moved towards the blade until the material is just touching the bolt. You can repeat this process as many times as you need. So all in all, I'm really happy with the jig. I've cut a few test strips. I cut these from oak at 1mm thickness, and then I cut some from beech at 2 and 3mm respectively. I'm really happy with the repeatability. I measured all of these with calipers, and the difference in thickness between the strips is fractions of a millimetre, which is well within the tolerances that I'm happy with. I did make one small error when I made the jig. When I drilled the hole out for the adjustment bolt, I didn't take into account how much clearance I'd need for the wing nut. So currently that nut catches on the tabletop when you're tightening it. To fix this, I simply need to drill another hole in the jig that's slightly higher to give me some more clearance, or use a smaller wing nut. Thanks for watching. I hope you found it useful. If you have any questions or feedback at all, then please feel free to drop me a comment on this video and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. If you have enjoyed the video, then please subscribe to the channel. I'm going to be uploading at least one video a week covering various woodworking projects and jigs, and it would be fantastic to have you along. Thanks for watching.